I'm Mark Boris, and this is Straight Talk.
Scott Young, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Mark, awesome to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Liberal candidate for Bennelong. So, mate, you're up against it. The odds are probably in favour of the current Labor sitting member. You've got the media against you. Unfortunately, the media is sort of rating Albanese much better in terms of his performances relative to his counterpart, that's Dutton. It feels like to me like everything's against you in Bennelong. How do you feel?
Look, it's not easy. Every day I count my blessings as well, and the gratitude to be, the Liberal Party's candidate in Bennelong. In saying that, I mean, it's I certainly enjoy being the underdog as well. When you're not the local member and when you're the candidate, you don't have as many resources as them. You don't have the office. You don't have all the staff that they have as well. But can I just say, it's an honour getting out there. We have a great group of volunteers that believe in not only Liberal Party values, but I think values such as equal opportunity and long-term prosperity for Australia. And we've mobilised a lot of people that I think weren't interested in politics before that are now and see the genuine opportunity to make a difference.
So, just explain to me where Bennelong is. Just explain the seat of Bennelong. So, let's give me the northern position axis, where it covers, what it covers it off. I know it covers Ryde, but it also covers, traditionally Hunters Hill, which is John Howard's seat. Where does Bennelong cover today with all the new boundaries?
Well, Bennelong, Mark, starts at the very top around Macquarie Park and Eastwood. It goes through Ryde, North Ryde, West Ryde, down through Putney in Gladesville. And then now it extends to, after the redistribution last year, through to Hunters Hill, Woolwich, Lane Cove, Greenwich, Riverview, and Chatswood West St Leonards being some of those suburbs as part of Bennelong now.
Right. And so if I could just go back a little bit of time, because you don't need to go back too far with you because you're only 30, I think. You're pretty
32,
young.
Mark.
32,
yes.
Okay. Well, you're the same age as Jimmy. So you're a young fella, so you don't have that many years to go back on. But Jung's obviously a Chinese surname.
Yes.
So what's the deal? What are your parents? Where do they come from?
Mark, Dad's from Hong Kong, Mum's
Yep.
from Shanghai. Dad came here in the 70s. I think he started school here in primary school when he was 9 or 10 years old. And Mum came here in the late 80s, leaving China. And they're both very grateful that Australia has given so much to them. Growing up, they worked really, really hard. So my first home was in public housing in one of those tall grey public tenements in Waterloo. Look, I just saw them working really hard, going to Paddy's Market, Flemington in the early hours at 6, 7 a.m., setting up a stand there and selling children's education books. So always witnessed them working extremely hard, just like your father, Mark. And I saw them build that into a bookshop and then that into a tuition business as well. That's still running by my older brother in Hurstville today. So
your dad being from Hong Kong and your mum being from Shanghai, does that mean you speak both Mandarin and Cantonese?
Look, in the beginning, I only spoke Shanghainese and Cantonese, but over the years, I've decided to also learn a bit more Mandarin, sort of picked up just naturally as well. So I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, and Shanghainese.
That's all. You speak the three Chinese, let's call them dialects, and because Cantonese is the what they speak in Hong Kong, Shanghai is what they speak in Shanghai, and
Yes.
Mandarin is the broader China's broader national language, Mandarin.
Yes,
Yeah.
basically. Yes.
And your parents. So you lived in one of those housing commission, what we called housos when we were kids. One of those houso places in Waterloo. They're apartments usually. They were apartments.
Yep.
Your mum and dad were working at the market selling books. Education books?
Yeah, children's
Why
education
that?
books.
Why did they pick education books? Is that what your dad did when he was in Hong Kong or something?
Yeah, look, Dad, I think knew a guy called Jim Coronius, who was actually a great, I think, publisher of those a Coronia series. So many back then would have done some of their workbooks. I think he was an incredible hard worker as well. So I think he took Dad under his wing a little bit. And Dad, before you know it, he was sort of getting my dad to distribute a lot of those books. So, my dad thought maybe it'd be a decent idea to go to Paddy's Market Flemington to start selling those books. And even when we had the bookshop set up, I think it was in multiple locations. It moved around a lot. That's why, as a young child, I think we moved around 11 times. But the bookshop started in Lakemba.
My old stomping ground.
Your old something.
Whereabouts in Lakemba, near the station? Do you remember? You're probably too young, were you?
I wasn't born yet. I wasn't born yet. And
Okay.
then it moved around, Mark, to Kingsgrove, to Bardwell Park, and eventually to Hurstville. But Dad and Mum worked so hard, so she would be manning the bookshop throughout the weekday, and then Dad would be driving around to as far as Orange. Driving a truck around to take the books to schools to sell to kids at lunch. So he'd be driving sometimes 3 hours there and 3 hours back just for that 1 hour window during lunch to sell books to children. But I think that's how it all started.
As in like a travelling salesman, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you got to get to the places who are going to buy the books. That just means you got to have the books in the back of your truck and you've got to go to those places.
Yes,
And,
that's right.
and pretty much have to, what you don't eat if you don't sell.
Absolutely, that's right. I remember going to the markets with my mum and dad, I think as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, and I'd always ask my mum, how much did we make at the end of the day on a Sunday at Paddy's Market Flemington? And then if it was $300, it was a pretty bad day. But if they say 600, it was always good. And we'd go out for a family meal at a restaurant afterwards. So
How many you got brothers and sisters?
I'm the middle child.
Yeah.
I've got an older brother
Yep.
and a younger brother.
3 boys.
3 boys. Gave mum a lot of havoc. So
Yeah, I can imagine. So, you went to school where? Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Sydney Boys High School.
That's high school. What about primary school?
I went to Kingsgrove Primary Public School.
Yep.
Bexley North Public School, and then eventually Hurstville Public School. So changed schools around a lot.
Yep.
I used to feel really nervous changing school every time. But I think looking back, with the benefit of hindsight, it allowed me to build some of those social skills, which I think, and communication skills as well. And I think they're so important for our next generation as well.
So you're born here. You got a full Aussie accent. You're educated here. Were you, when you were a little kid, especially in primary school, were you sort of socially aware that you were different to the other kids? In other words, was there much of a cohort of Chinese children from Chinese parents in the schools you were at?
Yeah, 50-50, Mark. Yeah. I think at Sydney Boys High, it was a selective public school, so certainly there was a lot of Asian background kids that were there alongside me. But when I first started off school in Kingsgrove Public School in Bexley North, it was overall very, very multicultural, had friends from all backgrounds. At the end of the day, you just think you're an Aussie like everyone else. Yeah. But then you start hitting recess and lunch, and when they're taking out their sandwiches, you're pulling out all the sort of Chinese food, the rice and the bok choy and the little meat pieces, and you're eating with a spoon, and they're eating, with their hands, and you're thinking, oh, it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit awkward. And you do want to conform as any young person might. So I started bringing Nutella sandwiches every day to school.
So did you say to Mum, make me Nutella sandwiches?
Absolutely. I just felt really awkward to be able to take out all the rice, and everyone else is just sitting in their seats having a sandwich. So Mum certainly helped with that. Took on the feedback. She didn't listen to me much when I was young, but very grateful in the end. That was
probably what was happening then, Scott, was they were probably thinking to themselves, my God, I wouldn't mind having a taste of what he's having. And instead you went and turned out the Nutella sandwiches. They're probably, I don't know, from my point of view, I'd rather be eating what you were eating. Because I had the same sort of thing going through school. We often ate food from whatever we cooked the night before, or whatever was cooked in the house the night before. And it could be anything. It could be from eggplant to all sorts of things.
Yes.
But my friends at my school, because I went to a school in Lakemba, but a lot of friends at my school actually wanted some what I was eating, and I actually found it was a bit weird. I thought, well, why do you want that? Why do you want that? But I was always happy to share it. Yeah. It's a funny thing when you're growing up in environments where not everybody's the same, but young kids want to be the same. You just want to be the same. So what did you do? Apart from getting Nutella sandwiches, did you start to feel as though that you conformed with things like sport? Did you start to get really interested in, say, local sports, maybe Canterbury Bankstown when you're at Bexley, Kingsgrove, that sort of area? What did you do?
Well, Mark, I know you're a big Roosters fan, and I remember coming up to you at Sydney Uni as a young 18-year-old, and I said, Mark, I know you're a Roosters fan, but I'm a Dragons fan, but I'm still a big fan of you.
Yeah, you're a Dragons fan.
Yeah, St. George, big St. George supporter. Red V's a part of me. But look, as a young kid, I was always into the footy. Everyone was playing touch, whether it was 6-on-6 or 20-on-20. It'd be good
At school,
fun.
that is, yeah.
Yeah, at school, even as a young kid, and in high school as well. I was a skinny Asian kid playing for High. Sydney Boys High, and we'd be smashed by Joey's 120-5. Our first grade, versing their fourth grade. But always loved the footy, always enjoyed it, loved the footy.
So you're off to Sydney Boys. That's a progressive school. What they mean by a selective school, I should say, meaning you had to get certain grades to get into that school. You have to win your way into Sydney High, Sydney Boys High, and the Sydney Boys High is a GPS school. It's one of the, I think it is, pretty sure it's one of the 6 or 7 GPS schools. So it's sort of up there, but there's no school fees. It's free if you get selected, and there's this sort of aura around the Chinese kids, and a lot of Chinese kids seem to outperform the other boys, and I want to ask you, do you think it's because of a cultural thing within your family or within your community that someone like you are able to get into Sydney Boys High? It's not because you don't have to be just bright. You have to know your topics. You have to have learnt stuff. What was the culture in your family such that you ended up at Sydney Boys High?
Look, absolutely, Mark. Like, I think the family business turned from a bookshop into a tuition business. So my dad personally tutored a lot of the kids. I was one of his students. So I can't
perfect.
take it. Yeah, that's right. So I can't take any credit for going to Sydney Boys High. In fact, it's so important for the family marketing that I do get a good result. I become a testimonial for the small business that my parents were running. So I think at the end of the day, I think if you put in the effort to know your topics, to study the questions, you can get a good result. I know it's a bit sort of a juxtaposition, but I think every Australian child actually should have the opportunity to have a quality tutor. I think classroom sizes whether they're between 20 or 30, it's a lot of kids, and I think a lot of kids need that one-to-one support, or just smaller group classes as well. But unfortunately, not every student gets the opportunity to do that. So that's why I think equality of opportunity through education is extremely important. But I think going back to your question, a lot of Asian background kids, Chinese, Indian, Koreans, I think their families really value education as well. So they obviously put their kids through a lot of additional learning after school, which I think is a good thing. But going to Sydney Boys High as well and finishing up, I think with the benefit of hindsight, I think whilst academic education is important, I think it's so important that we also teach our kids financial literacy, coding, public speaking, and life skills like resilience and teamwork. I think if kids learn how to work with each other more when they grow up, they know how to work with each other better.
It's interesting that, there's a perception, I think, that the Chinese community can afford the tuition when, in fact, you're saying to me that your mum and dad work their proverbial off in their businesses to build their businesses. And it's not like you're sort of, dripping in gold as a kid. There's probably just as many boys and girls of Asian background, Indian background, etc., who do really well at school and do really well on HSC and get into university from parents who have nothing but just decide that they're going to sacrifice it as much as they can in order just to give their kid or their children, all their children, a really good education. Education, which gives you opportunity, sits at the top of the tree when it comes to a lot of cultures. What did you learn from just watching your parents try their best to get their sons into a better position than they were relative to when they first came into this country? What do you learn from that?
Yeah, look, what I see in my mum, for example, she'd work so hard at the bookshop, and then it was a tutoring school after hours as well. She'd finish up at 8 p.m., get home by 8:30. She'd set me some homework for after school. But I remember even before her having dinner, she'd sit me down and go through some of the questions I didn't know, and that was already between 8:30 to 9:30. She'd do that routinely on most days in the week, and I always appreciated that about my mum. Looking back now, it was a bit stressful as a kid, but
do you think I want to go out with my mates?
Yeah,
or I want to get on. I presume you had the phones around at the time. Were there mobile phones?
I think there were mobile phones, but I didn't have one.
You didn't have one, no.
My parents, my mum was a tiger mum. Love her to death, but she's a tiger mum. So, look, I'd always be sort of getting the audit at about 8:30. Have you done your homework? Which questions don't you understand? So mum would always be investing her time, no matter how tired she was, into ensuring that she did her best. And as someone who runs my own education business now, so we do tutoring and also public speaking for young kids as well, I see a lot of parents come in and sometimes they don't come from, completely financially comfortable positions, but something that they don't cut back on is their children's education. They're really invested, and that's why I think every person should have that opportunity. In saying that, I really admire parents that take time out of their work, whether they run their own business or whether they're a young professional. They really sit down and they really make that time for their children as well. And it's not easy. A lot of the parents don't necessarily have a easy relationship with their kids. I think it's always a challenge to do that. But they always try their best. They sit down after work to help their children out with, literacy, numeracy, and even public speaking, to watch their kids rehearse some speeches.
Yes, it seems like your mum, without sort of trying to put too many labels on it, was relatively speaking uncompromising in relation to what you needed to do in order to be successful, just at school. Whatever you do after that's up to you to some extent, but to be successful at school in order to have an opportunity for down the track. And it looks to me like that uncompromising characteristic may be an important ingredient for opportunity to be available to kids. And I wonder if has any of that rubbed off on you? You come across as a really nice guy. You're really well presented. And I should declare I've known this guy for a long time. In fact, he worked for me. But as a young man, very young man, probably 12 years ago. I don't know how long ago it was. It was a long time ago. And but one of the things I noticed about you is, and I'm not here to give you raps, but you're uncompromisingly nice, respectful, well-mannered, but at the same time, your content is very good, well-researched or well-rehearsed even. You're very polished. Do you think is that something that you think your mum has sort of instilled upon you, or is that something you decided to become as a result of watching what your mum tried hard to do?
I think on the well-mannered and respectful side, I try to do my best. I think in our sort of Chinese culture, it's also very important to respect your elders.
Yep.
But I think respect is very, very important. My mum's very Buddhist. I think it's just important to bring empathy to everyone, whoever they are. In saying that, I'm grateful that my mum gave me a lot of grit, resilience, going through those hours of work late at night on the weekend. If I'm not doing 4 to 6 hours of studying, I'm in the shits.
Yeah.
So
during a holiday period too?
During holiday periods, I'd be doing 4 to 6 hours. I was studying every day. That builds a lot of resilience. It builds a lot of concentration. And I think it's about finding the right balance. So I think children need to be children. They can have the opportunity and should have the opportunity to play. But at the same time, I think to have that resilience and to have that grit and to be able to solve problems and learn how to think, I think is also very, very important.
Learning how to think, meaning what?
Yeah, I think with a lot of the problem-solving questions that I had to go through, there was a subject called general ability back in the selective schools test, for example, and they'd ask you questions about which one's the odd one out, and certain questions that really sort of strains your thinking. But I always found that looking back, you really have to just concentrate, think about how you think about things to solve a problem.
And do you think, you're a politician now, but do you think that you can take any of those things that you've learned from the efforts that your mother made in relation to your education, if we just zero in on that, and also any of the things that you observed from what your both parents did in order to get you in a position to do these things, that you would take into politics?
Yeah, 100%, Mark. I'm very passionate about education, and I actually think on top of a quality education at school, parents can make a massive impact. So, my mum obviously dedicated a lot of time. She familiarised herself as well with some of the content that I was going through. Now, mum doesn't speak English well. She does her best, but where she can with maths, for example, and some of those puzzle questions that she could look at with diagrams, she'd do her best to help me. And what we run in our education business is also now sharing with parents how to best connect with their kids, how they can play a role with their homework and their activities back at home. So I think Australia more broadly, can explore ways where they can help educate the parents to educate their kids. And I think that makes a big difference because kids go to school 9 to 3 p.m, but outside of that, in school holidays as well, I think that's where parents can make that massive impact.
Yeah, and it's a relative impact relative to those people who aren't doing it, because at the end of the day, and one of the things that kills me in this country is that we forget we are every one of us is competing every single day with everybody else. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but we are competing. We're competing for share of real estate, for share of voice, for share of everything. And it's a relative game. And a lot of people want to sit back and complain and all want to be the same. And want us all to be the same. And by the way, some of the political parties are about sameness, and to some extent that sort of verges on socialism from my point of view, or even getting closer to communism, where we're all the same. Now, your parents come from a country which is a communist country, and there are a lot of migrants in this country. In fact, in your electorate, who have left that country to come here in order to have a better chance at improving their lot. They don't want to be the same. They want the opportunity, or they want opportunities from Australia, from the Australian government, from the Australian system, to make us have a better life relative to what they would have had back in China, for example. I'm not picking on China in particular, but just for example. How important is that to you and your electorate? How important is that to the people in your electorate?
Well, I think the people in Bennelong, Mark, are aspirational. They want to be able to achieve their goals if they work hard, whether it's putting their children through a quality education, being able to start their own business. And for a lot of young Australians, they want to know that what I'm studying now can lead to more job opportunities. And if they're in university, for example, they're working hard at a cafe, they know that they can save up to buy a home. So I think, everyone should have the equal opportunity to get ahead. But I think reward for effort is also equally as important, because if you work hard, you deserve to get ahead. That's very, very important. And I think also as well, when we look at Australia more broadly, I think it's and you're very big on personal development, Mark, and health, and all round of that. But I think for every Australian person, they should be able to reach their potential. And I think you can only reach your potential if you're able to be in an environment where you work, you can grow. It's not about being at home and bludging. Surely, of course, there are a lot of Australians out there who can't help themselves, and we need to help them. But if you have the opportunity to grow, get out there, work hard. Take work experience if you can't get paid. And I think that is so important.
And so you did the high school certificate. You went off to university. What did you study at university?
I went to UNSW, and that's when I first met you, Mark, at the quad at UNSW. Yep. And I came up to you.
The quad being the quadrangle?
The quadrangle, yes. So I came up to you, Mark. I knew you from...
What was I doing out there? Was I doing a talk out there or something? Do you remember?
I think you're an adjunct professor at UNSW, Mark.
But was I speaking? Did you hear me speak or something?
I didn't hear you speak. I just saw you from afar. I was about 15 metres away. I was coming out of the Quadrangle Cafe. Yeah. And by then I was already a massive fan of you. And a bit of a man crush kind of thing. And I remember watching a video on you, Mark. It was on YouTube, and you were giving a seminar in that video, and you were talking about confidence building as a young 18, 19-year-old, where your confidence often fluctuates. You talked about building confidence by having the right intentions for other people. So when you think of someone or others beyond yourself, that's when your confidence grows as well. So having that righteous intention. It was one of your videos, Mark. So I came up to you and I said, "Oh, Mark, would I be able to work for you?" And you actually gave me advice that you said, "Oh, Scott, I think it's better that you actually go work at a Big Four bank. You'd learn more." And I said, "Mark, thank you for your advice, but one day I'd still love to come back and work for you." I really love the fact that, you're someone who has come from Punchbowl, worked so hard, built Wizard Home Loans, and you sold it for so much, but it's a testament to your hard work. And I think so many people out there appreciate your story of hard work and humility as well. And so I took your advice, went to work at Westpac, Bondi Beach, as a teller. I was terrible at balancing, and that probably makes me look bad, like I'm bad with money. But I was there for 6 months, and it was actually then I joined the Liberal Party, and I met a candidate called David Coleman, who was on the board of Yellow Brick Road.
Correct.
And after door knocking about 2,000 homes, I wasn't counting. I said to David, "Do you know Mark Burris?" He's like, "Oh, yes, I do," he said. And I said, "Can you get me a job at Yellow Brick Road?" And so he called your then CEO up, and Matt Lawler, I think.
Yep.
And I think I was placed in a team. And on my first and second day, I was tasked to staple, to file, and to scan. I told all my friends, "I got the job at Yellow Brick Road," I said. And then, but on the third day, I remember my manager telling me that there wasn't a role for me. And I just said to my manager, "Well, you know what? I'd work for free. I'll just work for free, 9 to 5, count me in." And then they took me on board doing that. And I was grateful for the work experience. And before you know it, I wanted to be the world's fastest stapler, filer, and scanner for the next 8 weeks. And it was so nice. My manager came up to me afterwards and says, "Hey, look, we're actually going to pay you for all the work that you've done. And we're going to have you on board." And from there, I was so grateful. I am so grateful to have worked at Yellow Brick Road for 3 years and 10 months. It was one of the greatest experiences.
You worked for Morello, though, did you work for Andrew? Andrew was there at the time?
Morello's a great guy.
Was he there at the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So he was your head of business development.
Yeah, so around 2009 or something like this is the period we're talking about?
I think this was 2013.
13. Oh,
Yes.
He was there for 10 years. So he started in 2009. I was just trying to remember the periods. And David Coleman, of course, is the member for banks.
Member for banks.
Yeah, the current member for banks. Actually, got a very slim margin too, David.
Very, very slim margin there.
Great. He's Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs. A great politician. Like, so dedicated. He gave away private enterprise, working in private enterprise, and he was a big achiever, like a very big achiever. He was at Channel 9 for a long, long time, and he's just dedicated his life to looking after his constituency out of the banks area completely. And there must have been a fair bit of inspiration or motivation you got from David.
Yeah, and I still do, Mark. I think he's someone who's so hardworking. A piece of advice he gave me when I was a 19-year-old door knocking for him is he said, "Scott, I don't know anyone who's successful that doesn't do a good job 100% of the time. So I always try to do a good job 100% of the time." And in fact, an incident happened when I was volunteering for him. He asked me to go do something, and it was meant to only take 10 minutes, but I took 20. And then he said to me, "You got to be efficient." So I think being efficient, not only just working hard, being efficient, being focused, getting outcomes rather than just putting in the time is extremely important.
Yeah, and so I forgot about David Coleman, and I shouldn't say that because I'm a huge fan of David Coleman, by the way. And so you've had some experience with David Coleman as well, like what the hard edge of politics can look like, like especially trying to get re-elected, or in your case you're trying to get elected, but trying to get re-elected, and it's sort of down to basics to me, from what I can see. It is about door knocking. I've been watching your campaign. It's about being everywhere as much as you possibly can. There's long hours. People want to see you. They expect it. Who is Scott Young? And that's one of the reasons I got you on the show, because people want to know who Scott Young is. You walk around shaking hands with people, but the idea of this show is to be able to show people who individuals are who come on the show.
Yeah.
And people they want to know your backstory, but you don't get a chance to do that when you're on the huskings trying to, say, we'll vote Liberal, or this is what I stand for, or hello, what's your business? I'm from your local area. It's hard for you to spend any time with anybody. Do you think politics is, I don't want to use the word shallow, but it's a little bit ephemeral in that you never really get an opportunity to convince someone why they should warm to you, as opposed to just being polite and well-mannered and shaking their hand and being prepared to do the work. They never really know whether or not what Scott Young's values are. And our values come from how we grow up.
That's right.
Our mum, our dad, the school we went to, the university we went to, the influences we had in our life. And off the back of that, you get 10 or so values about life. And you all talked about, people having opportunity. You're talking about education. You're talking about hard work. They're values.
Yeah.
And for some reason in this election, we haven't heard about that. I know that the TV stations haven't been getting Scott up there to talk, but the TV stations have been getting up Dutton, and they've been getting up Albanese, they've been getting up Bant from time to time, and others, Angus Taylor's been up there, etc., as has Jim and Jim Chalmers, but we've never. I don't think we at any one stage have heard in a broadcast sense, apart from this show, I think, but in a broadcast sense, people talk about what their values are. Where do values sit for you, and what are your values? What are some of your values, at least, relative to what voters might be looking for?
Yeah, 100%, Mark. I mean, just before we talk about values, if it's okay,
yeah.
I think politics in Australia, in fact, I think the overall climate can improve. I think there are so many, as an aspiring representative, I think in our current atmosphere and culture, there is negativity. The media is constantly watching what you're saying and what you're doing, and they could turn it into something that's quite negative, in fact.
Yep.
But at the same time,
and you don't get a chance to defeat it either.
Yeah, because I mean, the media is so big. That's why they do play such an important role in our democracy.
Yep.
And in saying that, I mean, for most part, I think politics is positive. You meet the best people in the community. But I've just come from early voting, and I've got some people and some of my opponents, their volunteers, just filming me. And it's almost like you can't completely share everything. So that's what I want to bring to politics, to be able to just be myself, put my ideas out there, which is so important.
So you're saying like some honesty and openness?
Some honesty and some openness, and to embrace someone for who they are. Everyone's got their strengths, everyone's got their weaknesses and flaws, but this is who I am as a person. And I think going back to values, I think what my father showed me was the importance of hard work and grit and resilience. And I think for mum as well, she taught me the importance of compassion, integrity, and also empathy, to always be able to put myself in their shoes. And as a Buddhist as well, one of our sort of core principles is that there is suffering for everyone, no matter who you are. So it's important to just be able to empathize where their positions are. And they're largely values that shape, I think, how I dictate my life. And I often get asked about a lot of questions as well. And sometimes if I can't make up my mind about something, I go back to those values. And I think taking a middle ground is also a very, very good approach. So
like, what is it like that when you're on the road? So you're walking through somewhere in your electorate, and someone walks up to you and says, "Look, hi, I'm Mark Burris. I live in West Ryde. I live in Ryde. I live in West Chatswood. Chatswood's part of your
Chatswood West. Yeah.
Chatswood West is part of your electorate. And I'm a small business owner." What are the sort of questions they ask you? What are they looking for? Or they just want to say hello?
Well, I think one of the first things I ask them, Mark, is what's important to you, and I do share with them. I'm a small fish in a big pond. I might not be able to get everything done, but what can I best advocate for you on? And for many people, they don't have any challenges; they're happy. But for a lot of people, they are also going through. For example, 30,000 small businesses have closed over the past 3 years
in your electorate, or across the country.
Across the country.
Yep.
But when you walk around West Ryde and you walk around certain suburbs, you see businesses closing down as well. You see the full lease signs popping up for new tenants that they're looking for. So I think the main thing is to listen and also just show empathy. People also understand, and I think people do, that one person can't change everything, but they appreciate you listening. They know that, you will work your hardest to be able to advocate to what's important to them.
So what are some of the things that they are, some are just happy to say hello, and as you say, they're doing okay, and they're either rustle on Liberals or rustle on Labor or whatever the case may be. You may not change their position, but what are some of the other individuals saying in your electorate, like that? So let's say small business owners. What are they sort of indicating to you? They frustrated with regulatory environments. They're frustrated with the council. They're frustrated with interest rates. What are they? What's bothering them? What's bugging them?
Well, small business owners are doing it tough, Mark. First of all, their spending is the amount of spending they see from their customers is down. Coffee sales have dropped.
So revenues are down?
Revenues are down. And on top of that, so many people that want to start their own businesses have to wait a long time to go through approvals, councils and bodies. And by the time they open up, their lease-free period, if they're lucky, which is 3 to 6 months, is already over.
So the period of their lease where they're not paying any rent.
That's right.
Where they're trying to have no expenses, which is a period where you want to get a bit of revenue if you can, because that sort of goes straight into the bank account. But during that period, they spend most of the time just getting through the hoops.
That's right.
Regulatory hoops.
Yes, absolutely. So it's not easy for these people. And on top of that, a lot of them share with me the challenges around hiring, training and retaining. It takes time to train up a barrister. It takes time to train up a reception. And before you know it, after 6 months, that all the effort and time that they've put in, that employee has left now. So it saps productivity out of the business. I mean, I think so many Australians right now are talking about the cost of living crisis, and so many people are talking about having less money to spend. I think as a country, we also want to focus on how we can become more productive, how we can make the most of each individual for them to reach their potential, but to also produce more output. And I think small businesses, which is a big creator of jobs in our country, can do more to also see that small businesses are empowered so they can hire, train and retain their staff.
It's funny, we keep talking about the cost of living in Australia, which is extraordinarily high relative to where it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. But we never seem to talk about the cost of running a business, which is also extraordinarily high. If we look at the cost of running a business today relative to the cost of running a business 3 years ago, it's through the roof. Like, it's just through the roof. But the amount of revenue they're receiving has not gone through the roof.
Yeah.
So, revenue is down, cost of running the business is up. Now, I know it's not quite as cute a word or a phrase as cost of living that sort of rolls off the tongue. It's easy for the newspapers to write about it. We never seem to see anyone talk about the cost of running a business. Rent, staff, staff turnover, staff education, staff retention, super, cost of goods, coming into the business, marketing costs, cost of websites, all the other stuff you got to pay for. There's licenses galore. You're paying licenses everywhere, like, Microsoft license for your website, license for your apps, there's licenses everywhere. Why is it that the Australian narrative do you think, does not talk about the cost of running business? What is that?
Look, Mark, I don't know. And I think Australia can have more potential.
Do you think we should have more conversations about this?
I think we should have more conversations about this, because small business owners aren't just doing it for themselves. In fact, they create jobs for people who live locally or not, to take on those roles. They stimulate competition, which is extremely important. That's why I love what you do, Mark, with Yellow Brick Road, creating competition for people to seek out the best loan, not just directly go to the banks. But going back to small business, I think we need to have more conversation around it. We need to be more ambitious in making Australia the small business capital of the world. How do we have more incentives for people to start businesses? And how do we have more incentives for small businesses to also grow once they hit certain milestones, for example?
Well, so your leader, Dutton, has recently announced the instant write-off being at $30,000 if the Liberal get elected or the coalition gets elected. I noticed in the last budget that the Albanese government actually got rid of the instant write-off, which they've since then have reintroduced it because obviously it was very, very unpopular. But apart from, allowing someone to be able to write off $30,000 or $15,000 or whichever party you're going for, for buying an item. You have to buy that item in the first place. You have to have the money to buy the item in the first place. So it's one thing to have the money. It's one thing to get the tax deduction, but it's another thing to have the money in the first place. It's not that easy.
That's right.
What other things could governments be doing for small business owners to encourage them to start up a new business, encourage them to stay in the business instead of vacating the business, leaving some vacant premises, losing all their staff, losing all their customers? What other things do you think and what sort of stuff gets discussed with the Liberal Party and the coalition in relation to helping small business owners?
Well, personally, Mark, I think one of the biggest challenges with small businesses is cash flow.
Yeah.
And I think cash flow is very, very important. So I think for a lot of small businesses, they often see delays in payments being made from big businesses. So we want to ensure that, if you're a big business, perhaps there is a length of time for you to pay your bills, to also pay the small business as well.
We should tease that out a little bit, Scott, because what you're saying here is that a small business has to pay his staff member, say every week or every fortnight. You have to pay your rent once a month. But let's say you're selling something to a big business. You're a small business. You're providing a service. So you're selling a product to a big business. A lot of times the big businesses are so big that they say, our payment terms, we'll pay you in 90 days. So you have a gap. You're paying your costs either weekly or fortnightly or monthly, yet your revenue that you've produced a product or service for is not coming in for maybe 90 days, sometimes 120 days.
Yeah.
So therefore there's a cash flow mismatch for those business owners.
Yes.
What would the government sort of talk about, would your government, if you guys got elected as government, would you be considering sort of pushing big businesses to change their payment structures and their payment terms?
Well, Mark, I think our party, the Liberal Party, is the party for small business. We're the party for reward for hard work and also aspiration. So in saying that, I mean, my personal views are that we should review it because like you said, whether it's 90 days or 120 days, that places a lot of strain on small business owners. And during tough times, they have to put in their own cash. They have to leverage off their mortgage. They have to take out loans just to make ends meet, to make sure that they can keep running their business. So this is something I would personally definitely advocate for.
You would prosecute it. And because that's really interesting too, because you made a point that most of these small business owners actually go to borrow money against the home or go and get an overdraft. The problem is at the moment we've got extraordinarily high interest rates. It's like really high interest rates, and we've had them for a long time. And that's like if most people think, small business owners, aren't they doing well? Well, most of them just make a living. They do it because they love it. They're not they're not all multimillionaires.
And they work 7 days a week. They're
all the time. They don't take holidays. They're the last person to get paid in the business. I mean, they pay everyone else. They're the last person to take any money. They usually don't take regular money. They take it in lumpy amounts when it comes in, but they don't take regular amounts. So therefore, they're having regular stress when there's no money coming in. You come from a family which was selling books and education tools, and if the money wasn't coming in, you would probably know about it in the family. Yes. You just talked about it, 300 a day versus 600 on a Sunday. That makes a huge difference to your family, how the harmony in the family is. I'm like, on one Sunday night, you might be going home having some eggs on toast. On the other Sunday night, you might be going out to a nice Chinese restaurant with your two brothers.
Right. Yeah.
But that's stressful.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're raising this sort of stuff because I really get frustrated when I see nothing in budgets from the prevailing government that even talks about small business owners.
Yeah.
It doesn't even talk about them.
It's not good enough.
It's not good enough. And I'm hoping Dr. Jim Chalmers is listening to this because it's not good enough, Jim. It's just not good enough. Small business owners employ 70% of every single person in this country that's employed. So small business owners collect the most payroll tax. Small business collect the most PAYE tax. In other words, they pay the most wages because they have the most staff. Therefore, they're collecting the most tax, which they become small business owners become tax collectors for the government. They collect all the GST for the government. They've got to submit it to the government. They've got to do returns, like special returns and tell the government how much they collected.
That's right.
They're the proverbial tax collector for the government.
Yes.
I just don't know why politicians don't say, well, let's do something for the small business owners. Like, one of the things I often thought about is, why wouldn't a small business owner who collects a certain amount of tax and employs a certain amount of people and pays a certain amount of superannuation to make sure that when people retire, they're not going to be dragging on the government's pocket with pensions and stuff like that? Why doesn't the government sort of say, you know what, there's a reward for that, and the reward's going to be your company's income tax rate, if you collect so much taxes, is going to be reduced by 1%. Something.
That's right.
Anything.
And then small business owners have that confidence, whether it's getting big businesses to pay them in a shorter period of time or getting that, that tax cut incentive. It allows them to feel confident and allows them to employ more people, to invest in more marketing, to invest in more product innovation and development.
Become more productive.
Become more productive. That's right. And I think that would give a lot of small business the confidence to grow. And speak. You're talking about our treasurer. I think what's so important for Australia is not only to think about wealth redistribution, but to think about wealth creation. I think I know there's so many initiatives being rolled out just to almost say before election time, hey, we want to buy your vote. We want to buy your vote. But you know what I think the Australian people respect, Mark? The fact that they respect someone with a long-term vision to think about how do we create more prosperity for Australia and for everyone, and that includes backing small businesses.
So if the coalition gets in, how important is Bennelong as a seat for the coalition to win this election?
Mark, Bennelong is the most marginal Labor-held seat in the country.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that the people of Bennelong play an important role in choosing who their local member becomes or is. So I think it's very important.
But is it close? Is it very close between you and, like, in terms of what the polls are saying? I mean, are we talking about, like, is it just, do you need a 1% swing or do you need a 5%? What sort of swing do you need to get Liberal into that seat?
Well, last time we lost the seat by 2,000 votes.
Wow, out of how many?
I think it was about 120 or so thousand voters. We lost by 2,000 votes. But I think the people of Bennelong are intelligent. We've got young professionals, students, small business owners, seniors. They know what's best for them. They know they want strong economic management that not only helps them alleviate the cost of living for the short term, but builds prosperity for the long term. The people of Bennelong know that we're hitting $1 trillion worth of debt for the first time in our country's history, and that more than ever, it's so important to think about wealth creation and not only redistribution.
That's an important point. 2 points there. And the first one I want to touch on is the debt. You mentioned that your electorate does think about this, but I often wonder, do people just go, yeah, well, that's there's always going to be government debt. I can't really manage any of that. I can't control any of that. I'm just going to be interested in what I'm doing. And therefore, the $1 trillion just sort of drops off the conversation. I mean, media has made a big thing of it, and it should be a big thing. And like $1 trillion of debt for this country means there's a percentage that is allocated to every single person in the country. If we've got 25 million people here, that means we all owe a fair bit of money.
That's right, exactly.
It's not that hard to work out. But for some reason, there seems to be, I don't want to say the word apathy. I think it's probably more confusion amongst voters that they think, well, I don't control that. I can't influence that. It may or may not affect me. I don't really know how it's going to affect me, because I know the government's not going to tap on my shoulder and say, Mark, put up your $200,000 worth or whatever the number is. I know that's not going to happen. So how do you get that point across? Like, what do you do about that? I mean, do you keep talking to people about this issue, or do you just at some stage say, no, I'm going to try and do something that's going to help you specifically, Mr. Voter?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to enrich our democracy on, so I think what makes our democracy fantastic, Mark, and again, many countries, communist countries don't have this, is the fact that our democracy is at its best when there's a high participation rate, and also, because we want people going out there voting and casting their votes in the appropriate way. But at the same time, when people go to the ballot box when they vote, they are well informed. So I think more than ever, I think political parties need to ensure that we keep the Australian people educated, that it's not only about short-term fixes, it's about a long-term game, how it affects people's children and grandchildren as well. And that's why when I'm going out there, I'm speaking to voters about the $1 trillion worth of debt that we're hitting, and more than ever. I mean, you were talking about 25 million, people paying off that debt. I mean, that's a lot of our future generations paying off that because we have an aging and retiring population as well. So I think it's important to get the message out there, Mark, for the long haul as well.
And you said the other point you made was as opposed to just considering redistribution of wealth, let's think about creating wealth first.
Yes.
And then, sure, we should redistribute some of that wealth because there are some people who just don't do so well. And unfortunately, they just have a disadvantage, and we don't want to see anyone disadvantaged. And you come from one of those backgrounds, so you wouldn't want to see anybody living in that sort of situation either. But before you can redistribute, you need to create.
Yes. And
creation of wealth is about being productivity. In Australia, unfortunately, we have one of the lowest productivity growths. In fact, we go back. We are negative.
Declines. That's right.
We're a decline for many, many years in measured against all the other OECD countries in the world, which is ridiculous. Do you think that's because we've had it too good for too long? We've got great resources, and we've been able to rely on our resources boom over the years. Do you think that's the reason? Why are we in a productivity decline? Why do you think it is?
I think Australia does have it very, very good. And I think there was a saying, good men create good times create weak men. And I think it's so important that we think about how we can actually build for the future. So when we're comfortable, I think as a person and as a country, we don't grow. And I think growth and comfort don't coexist.
Yeah.
So I think now that we're hitting $1 trillion worth of debt, now that families are paying more for their bills, I think this is a time for our country to just pause for a moment and think, where can we go for the future? How do we boost productivity? And in fact, in Australia, we talk about, the other side likes to talk about made in Australia so much. But what's good about Australia, I think, compared to the rest of the world, Mark, is the fact that we do have a decent minimum wage compared to the rest of the world. We want to constantly lift real wages. In fact, that hasn't been great over the past 25 years, is the fact that how do we build certain sectors up, not only in small business, but the technology sector, the tech sector, our edutech, our medtech. Australians are very intelligent people. How do we become the technology powerhouse of the world?
And technology obviously increases productivity big time. It's one of the big factors in terms of increasing productivity of just about every business. Edutech is an interesting one. What do you mean by edutech?
Well, I think there's so many, Mark, like innovative ways. Running my own education, small business, I think there could be so much more tech out there that can help children and families. We have very standardized testing systems overall in Australia, but imagine having adaptive testing. Which means that we look at each child based on their levels, and they sit through certain questions based on their abilities, so they can improve and learn at their rate. So the child
relative to themselves, as opposed to everybody else.
Absolutely. And I think that actually helps them out. So if you're a child that's excelling, you can be doing harder questions based on the adaptive testing. But if you're falling behind, then you can be allocated questions and help that can help you improve at the rate that you need to as well. So there's a lot we can embrace with technology. I think a lot of teachers out there spend tremendous amounts of time with administration, with unnecessary admin. They tell me about it all the time, but imagine we can help them imagine we can help them also quantify some of the things they're doing without them having to manually do it. I think that's important. So it helps teachers out, helps students out, but it also helps our economy out when it comes to investing in technology such as edutech as well.
So if you get voted in as the member for Bennelong, the Liberal member for Bennelong, how does the parliament work? I mean, does Peter Dutton, no doubt he'll congratulate you, and even if the Liberal Party don't win overall. What does that mean for Scott Young? Does that mean that you have any say in Parliament? How does it work? Because, you'll get in, you're the member, but let's say Liberal don't win enough seats, so they don't form government. Let's say Labor forms government with the Greens. What can Scott Young do then as the Liberal member for Bennelong?
Well, first of all, if I'm blessed enough to be chosen by the people of Bennelong, Mark, the position never belongs to me. It belongs to the people and the community that might choose me, that might put their faith in me. And it's so important, I think. And what I dislike about politics at times is there's a lot of fighting. And I don't think
infighting,
and also fighting in general, the blue side versus the green side versus the red side. And I think politics, when you go home and you've spoken to hundreds of people every single day, you go home and you go, why do I do this? And you want to help people. So you go, well, how do I find common ground to help as many people as possible? So if I am blessed enough to be chosen by the people of Bennelong, I will think, what's the common ground for Bennelong? Out of all those thousands of conversations that I've had, how can I best advocate for them? And I think for the people of Bennelong, it's the equal opportunity to get ahead, whether it's starting their own small business, buying their own home, or getting a quality education. But again, I think that's underpinned by building a stronger economy, not only thinking about redistribution. Of course, we have to help those that do need the help, that are vulnerable, but we got to think, how do we build a more prosperous Australia for everyone? And I think also there are so many people that come from different backgrounds, different cultures. We want one Australia with our Australian values of ensuring that we look after each other, a quiet sense of patriotism, and I think that's what brings our country together.
So I read an article the other day. I just want to clarify for the sake of this conversation, you're not a communist, are you?
Mark, seriously, I find it an absolute joke. I used to get offended by it when people call me.
Because you're Chinese, they think you're a communist.
Well, I think it's borderline racism.
Yeah.
Just because I've got an Asian face, my parents have come from China and Hong Kong. They call me a communist. And can I just say, you go to hundreds, if not thousands of events, you meet all sorts of people, you take all sorts of photos.
And you grew up here and you went to school here.
I was born here, grew up here. I'm a proud Australian. And something that I always say to our multicultural communities is that we're proud of our culture, committed to Australia's future.
It's interesting, for a lot of people wouldn't even know this, but like the thought of communism in Hong Kong, especially when your dad was growing up in Hong Kong, is like the most ridiculous thing, because I've been to Hong Kong many times for work back when I was in the law firm, and people from Hong Kong are the most capitalist, business-minded money makers that I think I'd ever met anywhere in the world. And Shanghai, by the way, if anyone has ever been to that city, like it is mega capitalist. I know it's a communist country, but it's like, you serious? Are these dudes so good at making money, and there's not even a skerrick of communism in them? But I did want to ask you that question because I have heard some people say that about you because of you look Chinese and your surname's Yung, Y-U-N-G. So what? Your first name's Scott. You went to Sydney Boys High. You spent your junior years in schools around, Lakemba and Kingsgrove and all those other sorts of places. There's the bullshit that people throw around during these elections. You're a young man. Have you got to a point at any stage where you thought, what the hell am I doing this for? Like, I'm getting barbs left, right, and center. I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve that. All I want to do is serve my community. I mean, and your community being the whole community. I don't mean your Chinese community. I'm talking about the Bennelong community. Do you ever think to yourself, why am I doing this?
Mark, some of those comments, and I just want to be open and even, vulnerable here, it does hurt you at times when people call you all sorts of things, such as the communist stuff. I'm a proud Australian. I love this country so much. I feel like I shouldn't even have to be saying that to justify it. But there are times where you think, why am I copying all this? There are times where you think, my mum's probably getting comments as well. But you think but I know that at the end of the day, that if I am successful, I can advocate for policies that help the Australian people. I think one policy can change the lives of millions of people, and that's why it's worth it. That's why it would be an absolute honour to serve. And if I ever get there, Mark, if I'm lucky enough to be there and I realise I can't make a difference, then I'm out of there.
Yeah.
Then I'm out of there, because you can also make a difference just like you have done in business with Wizard and Yellow Brick Road. But I think at the end of the day, you're in this to serve people. You're in there to find common ground, to advocate things effectively so that people are better off. And if I realise I can't do that, then I don't think it's worth it.
And I think politics can be an extraordinarily frustrating game. You will, if you win, that you get an office, or they pay for an office or something like that. Somehow you get government will give you a compensation because you have to have an office. Do you welcome people to come knock on your door and visit you? Right now you don't. Do you have an office now?
Right now we have a campaign office. So,
but you have to rent it's a private sort of thing. But if you become the sitting member, you get an office. They give you, the government must pay for an office, because your constituencies need to know where to go to visit you. Are you an open door type policy person?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so important to be able to be accessible. That is very, very important. And at the end of the day, whoever is elected, they're the ones who, taxpayers' money is being invested into their local representative, whether it's the office, whether it's staff, whether it's the local MP's salary. So it's you owe the Australian people, you owe it to your electorate to work your hardest for them. But I think whilst working hard is one thing, getting results is another. So I think it's so important to think, how will you get those results? How will I lobby shadow ministers or the leader or the prime minister in getting results for my electorate? I think you've got to be relentless about it. I think you've got to be smart about it. And that's what I would love to bring if I was ever given the opportunity.
And if someone's considering voting in Bennelong for either Labor, Greens. Do you have a Green member there?
There is a Greens candidate. Yes. No Teals, but
no
Greens
Teals. Greens candidate, a Labor candidate. Have you got an independent outside of the Greens?
There are, I think, a total of 8 of us.
8 of you.
So
8 candidates.
One from the Liberal Party, Labor, Greens, and the rest I think are independents.
Independents, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm one of the constituents of Bennelong, and I'm considering who I'm going to vote for, why would I vote for Scott Young?
Well, I think politics, again, is not about fighting each other. It's about finding common ground to help as many people as possible. My first home was in public housing. I went to quality public schools my whole life. I think every Australian, including those in Bennelong, should have the equal opportunity to get ahead. And I think in politics, you can find common ground. So if we have equality of opportunity to ensure every Australian child has a quality education, Australians can own their own home and retire comfortably. And if they can pursue their aspirations and succeed in it, whether it's small business, whether it's a young person's career, I think that is underpinned with a strong economy. And I think, again, I'd like to be, as one of the youngest candidates in the country, I think about the future, Mark, and I think about how we can actually have long-term policies around the economy, around education, around small business, where it can help people not only for the short run, but for the long haul.
They're their lofty ideals, and politics is hard to achieve lofty ideals because, even if you're in government, you've got your own party to deal with, and probably other things might get prioritized ahead of your lofty goals. So I guess if I'm a voter, I would say, okay, Scott, that's great. Sounds good. But are you a fighter?
I'm an absolute fighter.
You're going to fight for it?
I will fight for it. I'll fight to the death, Mark, for the people of Bennelong. I see people.
Why?
Because it's not easy. I think, again, in my principles and how I was raised as a Buddhist, I think it's not easy to be human in general. Everyone has their challenges. And when I talk to many people in Bennelong, many are going through challenges, but all, want their lives to get better. And that's why I'm in it. At the end of the day, Mark, it's much easier running my own education, small business. You can control your team, you can control the climate of everything. But what makes it worth it is knowing that there is a potential to advocate for policies that make our community better.
Scott Young, good luck, mate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for letting me be here. Cheers.